Hey, everybody. I'm Mike Hudson. I want to thank you for joining us today on Accessible Pursuits podcast. As always, I'm with my cohort, my partner in crime, Greg Trainer. I'm excited about today. We're going to talk a little bit about some personal pursuits of some ideas that me and Greg have been running through our minds, just to be able to cover a little bit of topic that is important to both of us. But Greg, man, how are you doing today in PA, brother?
Man, I'm doing real well. It's a little bit warmer than I like, but you can't complain about the weather. You just wait a while and it'll change. We're experiencing a pretty bad heat wave this week. I think it's going to be 94, 95 degrees, and I know that you're dealing with it as well. I'm lucky that we have air conditioning and I can stay inside on hot days like this.
Yeah, man, it's a little weird though because I think all along the East Coast we've got a massive heat wave, but we got a message yesterday from Duke Energy saying, hey, everybody try to conserve so we can keep the power grid going. That worries me a little bit, little bit. Or are we consuming too much power, or our grids not up to what they should be? But then I also saw, me, I'm always nerding around somewhere and saw where Duke Energy's bad about selling some power off the grid to other places. So, maybe they need to keep things in house and take care of the customers that are paying them.
Man, that is scary whenever you get to notice that you may have experienced rolling blackouts,
Yes.
especially for people with disabilities. And I know that when I get overheated, it bothers my breathing and kicks in
Yeah.
a whole slew of symptoms of dysreflexia. And I have to be very careful on it and try to cool myself down as I know you do as well.
Yeah, that's the scary part is it's different than just being uncomfortable. That's life or death for us because we can't sweat, we can't regulate. And so that, it can get to that point. And you talk about rolling blackouts. That's the scary part for me too, is they did that 2 years ago at Christmas. We were having extremely cold for the South. And so they shut down everybody for like 3 hours at Christmas time. And so we're lucky enough we had gas fireplace, stuff like that. So we had heat. But man, what happens to the folks that didn't? And so even for those 3 hours, your temperature drops 20, 30, 40 degrees in your house in that 3 or 4 hours. I mean, it
Absolutely.
could be life or death for somebody.
Absolutely. I know around here they do cooling and warming centers, for people that don't have air conditioning or have trouble heating their homes. But the issue with that is transportation getting to these warming centers. And then,
Exactly.
they have certain hours that they're open. They're not 24 hours. So what do you do whenever it's still 90 degrees and, you have to deal with that?
Yeah, and you have no transport. It gets into what our topic is today, man, is you got logistics. And that's the scheme and scam for everything is you got to make things fall in the parameters. And you're right. What happens to those guys and girls that are homeless? You got this populace that now they don't have those infrastructures like we do to be able to get from point A to point B. So what do you do to those guys and girls that are stuck outside on brutally hot or cold days? That gets rough, man.
And as you said, Mike, it's not just a matter of convenience or being comfortable. It can be life and death for the very young, the very old, and people with disabilities.
Yes. And that, it's a doggone shame the parameters that we have to fight with sometimes. But when you're dealing with insurance is one thing, and when you're dealing with actual factual life and death, that's something completely different.
Absolutely. And I think it affects a lot of people in the rural areas, even more so than the city because of public transportation. If we're stuck out in the sticks where you and I like to be sometimes, we don't have access to a lot of the services and community events and things of that nature, but also community centers that are typically holding these warming and cooling shelters, along
Right.
with churches and nonprofits, things of that nature.
Right. It's all about the logistics, being able to get to the situations real time, be able to get to people in a timely manner so that you can actually take care of their needs. it gets very difficult the further you get away from the infrastructures.
Mike, you're actually going back for your PhD. I know you've been working on that. And I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about education and some of the barriers to education and how things have changed since you and I have gotten our undergrads over the years, and maybe encourage people to go back to school and let them know what your experiences are like today.
Yeah, man. That's one of the things, Greg, I truly love about being able to share these podcasts with you is just thinking outside the box. And not forgetting our roots and where we came from. Me and you're getting on some years now of spinal cord years, and I just celebrated 30. I know you're well into your 20s of just spinal cord years. But you're right, man. So education was not really the top thing on my priority list before my injury. I enjoyed public service. I was in law enforcement in the military, was doing what I wanted to do. And so I never went to college. Well, let me back up. I went one semester right after high school. Did not like it, did not want to sit behind a desk again. I was ready to get out and get to doing the careers that I wanted to do. So I postponed college, went straight into the military. After my injury, I knew that if I was going to be productive, I had to get an education. And so started back to college right after my injury. And back now, this will be what, fourth degree. So,
Well,
um, PhD is a whole nother animal, man. It's wearing me out. It'll be well worth it if I can make it through. But yeah, there's a lot of parameters and a lot of barriers that we have to face. And I know you have your master's degree, same thing. And you're right. Hopefully, this podcast will allow some people we can shed some light on some stuff that we've had to deal with in our past, and encourage other folks to get back out and get that education. It's one of those things they can't take away from you, man. The more you know, the better off you're equipped, and the more you can go with.
it's surprising how many people with disabilities do have advanced degrees that have
Yes,
gone back to school. A lot of people assume that, we don't follow up with education or that we don't get the degrees that other people have. But I think, a lot of people with disabilities have advanced degrees.
we do. And it's one of those things, we know that we're already going to be behind an eight ball. And so the guys and girls in chairs will fight forward more and more to try to get educated, to try to be able to bring different parameters and different aspects in it because they're already marginalized on so many other avenues. They see that they're a lot of times sidelined. We joke around about it, but it's not a joking matter. We can be overeducated but underemployed, and we see that a lot.
You mentioned that phrase, Mike, and we say it quite a bit. Uh, there's so many barriers to employment that we lose a lot of safety nets, we lose a lot of services. And as you know, our spinal cord injuries aren't static. We have good weeks, we have good months, we have good years. But to pull that safety net out from under somebody, it can be a huge barrier both for employment and education.
You bring up a great point, Greg. We never know, and it sounds sad. It's not cliche. It's not a talking point. There's a lot of times I go to bed feeling fine, wake up the next day, and I just don't feel well. Don't know what it is, and it might take a day or two before it really manifests and lets you know exactly what it is. And it could be something like a UTI or pressure issue. We just know we don't feel right, and then it might take a day or two and it might clear itself up. But those are true barriers for people with disabilities. When I was working at Social Security, I would have days like that where I would get up and I was going to work, 40 or 50 hours a week. As a quad, that's pretty testing on your body for long term. And, I want to be able to pull my own weight. I don't want to be a stumbling block for somebody beside me or behind me that's coming along with a disability, because not everybody with a physical disability has those same good or bad days. Everybody's different. We're all individuals, but a spinal cord injury really puts a lot of taxing on our systems.
And it can be something very simple that causes dysreflexia. It could be an ingrown toenail. So when you're not feeling well, you almost have to be a detective and have a checklist of things to check and find out, what's the likely cause of this. Because as quads, we don't have total feeling, total sensation, and all of us are different. But it's really a mystery that we have to, solve each time we don't feel well. What is it? What's causing this? What's causing the chills? What's causing the sweats, the headaches, the racing heart? It can be quite challenging.
Man, you said a mouthful right there, buddy. We're lucky that both of us went to Shepherd Center and they're so advanced in, trying to teach you, your family members and whatnot, what to look for. And dysreflexia is one of those funky animals, man. It can come out of the blue. You may not ever have it. I know some quads that rarely ever have it if they don't. And then others that have it multiple times a day. And it's just, again, individualistic what your system's doing, what nerves were affected. But you're right, man. I know when I got hurt in 1995, dysreflexia was so new to a lot of even doctors. And so Shepherd Center gave us these cards we kept in our wallets. And so if you really started feeling funky, you took it and even told the doctors at the ER, these are my signs and symptoms. This is what you look for. And so even doctors, that was mind blowing to me that these medical professionals wouldn't even know what dysreflexia was. But if you did not do something in the spinal cord realm, these guys and girls didn't even know. Now it's more widespread. But man, I'm with you. You got to figure it out. Is my pants or my socks too tight? Am I sitting on a catheter? And you're right. You go through almost like MacGyver style checklisting. What is it? And if you can't find it there, you move on to the next check.
And even today, Mike, is as good as doctors and healthcare have gotten over the last 30 and 26 years. I find that I have to educate a lot of working professionals about
Yeah.
spinal cord injury, not because they're not intelligent people, not because they don't care, but they don't have the experience that I do, that you do, living with this spinal cord injury for so many years. We have to be the experts on what our bodies are doing, and then relay that information to the healthcare professional in a nice way, in a professional way. And I find that when we have an education, when we have degrees behind our name, it actually carries a little bit more weight when you tell a person, hey, I've got a master's in rehabilitation counseling and assistive technology. I know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about AT. I know what I'm talking about when I need something, to benefit my health. I think it comes with a little bit more weight with an education.
It does, man. You're able to articulate a little bit better, be able to speak on their terms, and you're right. Dude, that's what I love about doing these podcasts. You bring up so many great points, Greg. And it's about educating for yourself. It's about advocating for yourself. Everybody's going to have to be their own advocate. We see it more and more. Healthcare professionals, they're highly intelligent people. They go through a lot of years of advanced training in being able to take care of people. But here's the kicker. When it comes down to it, everybody's an individual. What works for you may not work for me. You can take, and I've told practitioners this over and over along the years of doing advocacy work, you can take 100 quads, all C6, 7 quads, put them in a room, and if you've got 100 of them in there, you're going to have 100 different diagnoses.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
you may have one or two nerves that are going to be affected the same, but here's the kicker. Every one of those guys are going to have different pain tolerances. All those nerves are going to be different. There's thousands of nerves in the nervous system along that spinal cord. What was damaged in the midst of the causing factor? And so every one of those things are going to be a little bit different. Start treating the patient and not the chair.
Yep.
Get to know the person. And then that way you'll have a better outcome for that person and your medical practice.
Absolutely. And that's what we try to do, Mike, is leave it a little bit better for the next person coming in the office. We try to talk with people, we try to educate, we try to advocate, and let people know what we're feeling, what we're thinking for the next person. It's just going to be easier and easier as people go, to doctors' offices more with spinal cord injuries, and they learn, and we do it as a cooperation.
Man, you said it. It's about raising awareness. It's not about being a squeaky wheel or a complainer. It's not about that at all. And matter of fact, advocacy doesn't need to be a negative point. It needs to be a
Mhm.
positive. We can go in on a good positive talking point and just build upon it. And it's not necessarily about our journey. Sure, we need to be able to put real world behind it. They need to know who Greg Trainer is. And so when you can start sharing your story, sharing a little bit about real personable advocacy, what it's like to be real time in that chair, so that you get that information, that paperwork off of somebody's desk at an insurance company, and they get to know I'm not just a piece of paper. That's Greg Trainer. And then when they start seeing that the products that you're asking for is not just something that you want, it's something you need. And then
Mhm.
when they can tell, hey, that piece of paper is independence for Greg, and
Right.
then you can get that off of that table and actually put it in the real world practice. Now you've got Greg being more independent,
Right.
and it's about raising advocacy, not just for you, but now they start seeing, hey, this product worked for Greg. Maybe it'll work for other people in my practice.
And Mike, we can take that from healthcare back to education. I know things were different. For me, I went to college right out of high school. I was attending Penn State, I think, right at my 18th birthday, and I graduated on time. But then I didn't go back to school for another 10 years, and it was different. Is going back as a quadriplegic. It was a whole lot different. What's your experience like now going for your doctorate as a quad? And I know that you have to do a lot of advocacy and education of even your professors on how you do things, how you write your papers, and all that. You want to talk a little bit about it?
Man, I'm gonna tell you, man, that's a whole different animal. When I got hurt in 1995, I went back to college. Started out just getting an associate's degree. Wanted to see, what's this college life like. As a quad, you said it. I didn't go directly from high school on. I was actually already hurt, so we still use text. We had we had books. Now I'm a quad trying to, and I was pushing a manual chair. So I'm trying to figure out where am I, am I going to have a backpack? What am I going to do with these books? And so I would put them on my lap some. Now you got a whole nother animal with, books sliding off your lap. If you have spasticity, you're over here jumping around throwing your text in the ground. And then you add in, being a quad, can you flip pages? Can you do whatever? And then now everything is online. Matter of fact, my PhD is not in person. We do have opportunity to be there in person, have multiple classes through Zoom and Teams. And then you add in the parameters of PhD and AI and all these different formats. There is a ton of logistical ruling just to be able to go back and be able to do some of your coursework. Anything associated with the PhD, you have to really watch plagiarism. They
Absolutely.
monitor that stuff like it's going out of style. Everything that you write, you have to be prepared to publish. And
Hmm.
so everything about coursework, I'll just give you a small synopsis. Um, in our undergrad, you have so much you have per class load, right? So you may read a couple little volumes of text, and this is not to knock undergrad. That was hard enough, but what I do in a semester now is one semester's coursework, I might read 27 books in their entirety. You have to do multiple writing stats. And so this one course I'm in now is a PhD, is going to be in leadership and leadership development. So right now, this course I'm doing is advocacy in a real world format. And so what we're looking at is ADA protocols and how we can make those more wheelchair friendly and more environmentally sound. Meaning, where do we get bite for buck out of the ADA, right? So we'll read 27 books during this coursework, and then we have 11 writing assignments that vary from 5 pages to 25 pages, and that's real world research projects. And so you have to do all the research behind it and then be prepared to publish them. A lot
And
of
now, Mike, when you say that you're reading this volume of material, for instance, 27 books, you're
yes.
reading this all on your laptop, all on your computer, or are you using any audio books?
Great question. Great question. So some of them, you and I, man, I don't have time to read 27 books, being honest. And so I do a lot of Audible. Audio books are fantastic, but here's what ends up happening when you go to Audibles, right? Everybody reads at a different pace. The speaking guides do great because they're able to read through kind of monotone, but they get into a cadence, right? So some of these guys and girls, they're hired to read because they can read on a proficient level. And so you can just follow along. You now take on a different context because this is what I do. And I'm just speaking for self. A lot of times I'll read a book during the day and then I don't get much sleep at night just because of my injury, because of my past history, and just I don't sleep well at night. So I do a lot of work even through the night. So when I get in, I throw in my earbuds, and while my wife's asleep, I will listen to an Audible book and go through. The problem is now that book becomes 6 and 8 hours long, and you have to hit pause, write down quotes, and then with the PhD program, you have to be able to cite where it came from. So now I got a whole different dynamic of being able to follow along and figure out where that quote came from in the span of that 6 or 8 hour book.
Wow. Wow. You know, that's something that a lot of people don't think about is how you cite a reference. You know, in a PhD program, they have a certain way that they want everything written, everything
Yeah.
cited and documented. And somebody with a disability, it's not like you can just jot down or dog ear a page or underline. You probably have to create notes by voice where that specific quote's coming from and keep like a rolling notebook a digital notebook by using voice. I don't know if that's how you do it, but
Man, it's funny you bring up a great point there too, Greg. I know I don't know how your master's went, but in my master's, we did a thesis and we did some we had to do some writing on that. And you have a thesis defense just like you will in a PhD where you have a
yep.
dissertation defense. So whatever you write goes before a board, they read it, and then you have to defend your work. And if you do it well, there's not a lot to defend because the paper stands on its own. That's what I'm hoping my PhD will be like. But that's individualistic too. It is all based off of how much work, research, and you have to cover questions and concerns, even coming from a sideline, that you just try to get ahead of any questions that they may have for you, right? And so again, great point. How do you write? Where do you write? In my master's, I didn't have as much, but these were clunkier computers back then, right? I was doing a desktop that had a hard formatted keyboard. Now everything I've got is on my tablet, which is a little bit easier to type with for some. For some others, if I'm doing my laptop, for instance, the buttons are too spongy for me to be able to type on. So a lot of times I will use notes on my phone, do a write up, then I have to create a Word document and then put it in APA format for the PhD program. So it's causing me three different steps, but that's what works for me. It's not ideal by any means, but then if I try to do voice to text, now you add a whole nother parameter where you have to give it hard commands, period, quotation marks, all of those things, and it takes away to me sometimes in dictation. So I'm trying to carry out a topic, right, and talk through it, but then when I have to stop to add a period and whatever, it to me I lose train of thought.
And even if you have auto punctuation on, you still have to go back and edit. You know, that's what a lot of people don't realize is it probably takes you, you know, at least twice as long, maybe three times as long to write a document because of the editing, because of how you have to do it. Even though voice recognition has come such a long way, especially since it's gone mainstream. You know,
Yeah,
when you and I were first injured, we were using drag and dictate. And now,
yeah,
you know, every iPhone in the country, every laptop, you can just talk and it types. And it's very user friendly. You don't have to know a lot of commands. You just talk and it types anymore. And that all came from, working with people with disabilities so that we could use voice to text.
Man, that's right. We've a lot of these good things, these good inventions and whatnot came out of bad situations or trying to remedy something. We look at any kind of formatting or inventions come out of the mother of all inventions come from somebody having a need or a desire to facilitate a workaround. And so we've figured out over time how to do talk and text and all that. But if you look at dialects, sometimes you can speak into your computer and then look down at whatever you just said, and that sentence can be garbled so much that it does not have anything to do with what you just said. So you have to go through and re-edit every piece of topic that you just covered. It adds a lot more of a dynamic. Now you're adding more hours into already hour-long processes.
What I've always found helpful is to think of what I'm going to say and
Mhm.
then dictate it like a newscaster.
Right.
So, I would say today I'm working with Mike Hudson on the Accessible Pursuits podcast, period. It's going really well. But to have those thoughts that you have to be so precise also can be taxing.
Oh yeah.
You're always on. You're thinking, is your microphone on? Is it picking up background noise? How am I going to edit this? And not to belabor the point, but it works great, but you have to know what you're doing, and it requires a lot of extra time on top of everything else you're working with.
Yeah. And that's just part of the process too. We have to work the system. If we want those advanced degrees, we're going to have to put in work. If they were easy, everybody would have a PhD. And but Greg, it brings up another point. You and I, neither one really want kudos. I'm gonna say this, and some people might say I'm full of whatever. I'm not really working on the PhD just for me. It's about being able to advance our advocacy. It's about being able to become an expert in a certain area. And so mine's going to be my dissertation is going to be around disability works. And so that's something that I live every day. It's not just a talking point. I live it. You got a lot of medical doctors, and we say this, and this is not to take anything away from them. When they take their lab coat off at the end of the night, they're still a doctor, but they're not in the middle of practicing it. When you
Right.
and I get ready to log out at the end of the night, we're still quadriplegics. That doesn't change. And so all my dissertation work is going to be around quadriplegics and ADA protocols. It's what we live every single day. And if we don't make the changes in our area and if we don't make changes in our community, the changes just don't happen.
That's right. That's right, Mike. You know, since COVID, since 2020, we've all gotten on Zoom. We've all used our computers for 5 years now, and it's been wonderful, but it's also limited our interactions, with people. I mean, to be
Yeah.
honest, you and I can be in two different states every week. We can hold our podcast. We can do our YouTube videos. It's great for that. It's great for telemedicine when I don't have a transportation to get to my doctor. We can do tele rehab now. Wonderful things. Like, what's your opinion, and what's been your uh, focus going to school online? Has it changed your experience?
Man, it has, and like you said, some of it for the betterment, some of it for, my opinion, worsening situations because you don't have the same dynamic. So I don't have that long-term working relationship with a professor that I'm sitting in a class with, right? They can see my injury, they can see that what limitations I may have with hand dexterity, all those kind of things. But to me, it opens up an avenue that now you got more broad spectrum, more people can go to school because they don't have those physical needing to transport. But now that you're going to have to add in good Wi-Fi and you're going to have in all that stuff so that you can be on Zoom or team meetings. And then so you add that dynamic, right? All of it has a give and take.
Yes, sir.
That being said, we've got an opportunity that you can um, broad base and reach out to more people. There's more educational opportunities. I got accepted to two different universities for my PhD. One of them was in Virginia, and great school, but they wanted you to come in person just for part of a semester. Might not be a difficult part for some people, but moving up to another state for 3 weeks, 6 weeks, it just made a whole nother logistical challenge. And so I
Mhm.
chose to go to the university that's closer to me, that if I needed to get over there for whatever reasons, a lot more opportunity to get there. Um, but that being said, now you've taken away some of the parameters that would fall in place if you were in class. And I say that where syllabus, for instance, they would hand out a physical syllabus if you were in class. You could look at it, go over it. Now you have to do everything on your own in a schematic that will have different sections listed out, and you could easily overlook something on a full syllabus that's online.
Yes.
So you
Mhm.
have to really pay attention to all your due dates, different modules that may come about, different talking points. And another thing that people don't understand in the PhD program, not only do you write your papers, now you have to look at your components, all your other classmates, and you have to have responses to them. Cannot be generic. They have to be cited as well. So if you wrote a paper, I'm gonna have to turn my 5-page paper in, but then I'm gonna read your 5-page paper and give you good and bad critique. And they need to be cited, and I need to give reasons why I'm saying, Greg, you may want to ask a question a different way, or have you
Mhm.
thought about this? And this is where I get the information from. So it helps you build a better dissertation defense, and it allows you to be a better researcher. But at the same time, it really makes you make sure you cover all the bases because other people are going to be critiquing your work.
Absolutely. And you need to know how to critique somebody, do it professionally, and add
Yes,
to their experience. You know,
right.
as you said, you're trying to help them with their dissertation. You're not
Mhm.
trying to be overly critical, but as an expert at that level, the PhD program, that's what everyone expects. And
Yeah.
I want to commend you for going for your PhD. I know how much work that is, and I know that you're going to do, great things with it. You're not doing it so that I have to call you a doctor every week, but I probably will, Mike, because you deserve it.
No, it's not about that at all, man. I want to learn more. I want to know more. We can't know everything about every disability. Unfortunately, you and I are in that disability realm, but we want to advocate for others. That's why we do these podcasts and be able to talk to people every week. I like covering topics like this because, more and more people need to get out and be educated, be able to share with people. It's not about critiquing. It's about finding what is right, wrong, with our community and being able to help fix it. If we can talk about what's good with ADA and all the parameters that they brought about, we're 30 years out of ADA passing in the 1990s. Um, that's great, but now what do we put bang for buck? There's not a lot of bite. There's no really enforcement of some of the ADA protocols. So if you have a hotel, for instance, that does not have bed parameters set in place, what do you do? I mean, you can post it on social media, you can talk about it, but if they don't, there's no real fining that goes along. If people are parked in a handicap parking, for instance, says minimum fine or maximum fine of $250. Good luck finding somebody that's going to enforce it. It just makes it difficult.
What a lot of people don't realize too, Mike, is they need that parking lot's permission to
Hmm.
ticket that car.
Right.
So I've often been in a parking lot where people were parked, quote, illegally because they don't have a placard or a handicap plate, but the particular grocery store doesn't allow the law enforcement officers to ticket the cars.
Right.
So you're in a catch 22 situation there.
And I know we're getting off topic a little bit with it, but it comes back around that that is right in the topic wheelhouse. I have to defensively park when I go out, because I've had people, even some people with disabilities, park in the grade. And we need that to be able to get the lift open, to get our chairs turned, to get on the lift. It's not like we want an extra large parking spot. These chairs take up a lot of room to be able to get on the lift. And I've got one of the ATC lifts now that come out at an angle. You need that grate. And if somebody pulls and parks a little bit funny, now I'm stuck. And you
Right.
have to either wait on somebody to come outside, which you have no idea where they are in their shopping spree, right? Or you have to go into, say, like a Walmart and get them to broadcast it and hope that that person's listening and knows their driver's license or their tag number to come out so that they can move their vehicle so you can get in. We're inconvenienced, and that inconvenience can really cause somebody issue.
Yep.
You and I may be stuck outside in the heat waiting. And at the beginning of this podcast, just said we can't sweat. We have all these now. We're waiting on somebody to come out and move their vehicle.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It can be a serious situation. I mean, a lot of people make jokes about parking and accessibility, but it can be rather serious. Um, along these lines, Mike, going for your PhD and writing about the ADA, what is going to be your focus? What change would you like to see enacted as far as the ADA or to make things more accessible for folks like us?
Man, now you that's a whole big animal, man. That's like taking small bites out of a big elephant. ADA, man, when they came about, when we're looking at disability rights, and you see the forerunners, and you got people like Judy Heumann that came along in the 1960s that really they were the forebearers of what we have in disability rights. And for so anybody listening, look up Judy Heumann. She spells her name a little bit different. It's Humenn. I think I'll check it and we'll tag it. But Judy Heumann really came along, became partially paralyzed because of polio. Tried to get into college, had some avenues of disability, was blocked because of her ailment alone, her physicality alone. Highly educated lady, and ended up starting with Dr. King, and starting to say, hey, there's people that not only people of color that are having issues, people with physical disabilities are being blocked because of barriers at school levels, buildings that were blocking them. And then she was able to get into college. And her and a guy named Ed, they both same issues, physical ailments blocked them from being able to get into college. Those were our forebears for disability rights. All of that started what was an additional 20 plus years of push to get the ADA passed. And so now that ADA is in effect, we need to find more parameters. One of the biggest things I'm doing research on now is how do we fly? That is a massive, massive monster to attack when you're looking at things like chairs being damaged and looking at scholastic journals. There's research over and over again of potentially up to 27 chairs per day in the United States are being damaged beyond repair.
Wow.
27 a day nationally. That is unacceptable. These are our legs.
That affects people traveling on business. It affects people traveling on vacation, and it's not just a one-day inconvenience because it can take months to get a wheelchair repaired. It can take months for these claims to go through and be processed. So that is huge when you're talking about 27 wheelchairs being damaged per day throughout the country.
I was reading some different articles in these just different scholastic journals. Um, Paraplegic News, for instance, did one and said that, it's not only raising anxiety for people that travel with chairs, because these appendages, these chairs are our appendage,
Yeah,
in real time, that even some of these things have caused some folks the detriment of life. Um, and there's been a few people that have actually perished based off of just in-flight issue and incident,
sure,
where they've had one or two guys get dropped in a transfer, broke a bone, became septic. Next thing you know, that caused their life to be cut short. Or people that have been left on planes for extra amount of time and end up with a pressure situation that
Hmm.
turns into long-term issues that may never be resolved. And then you brought up another good point, your chair damaged, right? We know that we have to fight insurance on some of these things. Your chair may never be repaired to a position that it was like prior to that damage. And then now we're in a catch 22 where we have to wait 4 and 5 years to get a new chair. And that's if it falls under a schematic that it's a certain percentage of the chair is not repairable.
Right. Right. Things that, the average person doesn't think about when they see a wheelchair user going down a gangway to board an aircraft, how much thought we have to put into packing, of taking things off of our wheelchair, our T handles, of writing instructions on how to move the chair, on how to turn it on, how to tilt, recline. It's just amazing what we have to do just to minimize the damage. And we're always kind of thinking about what if, what if this happens? What if that happens? I'm in a strange city. Who am I going to contact to, help me with this chair? How am I going to get it repaired in Boston, or how am I going to get it repaired in Las Vegas, or what have you? So it does add to a lot of stress and anxiety for people with disabilities traveling.
Right. And again, we need to do these things on a positive note. So the airlines, they see there's an issue. The problem I have is they know there's a massive issue. They're just putting band-aids on some of it. Some of it they need to push harder. There's an issue. Let's get out and get ahead of the issue if there's a known issue.
Right.
That's my point. Fix the problem, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But you bring up other avenues there, Greg. You're talking about physical barriers. We're talking about physical issues that coincide with getting on airplanes. You're not talking necessarily always about the stress, but man, you raise a whole nother stress level when you have to pre-prepare for
Mhm.
situations you don't even know are going to come into existence. You pray they don't, the negative part, but we need to be ahead of that just in case they do. But I had a question on yours. You went straight from high school right into college. But then when you went back for your master's degree, you were injured. So what kind of barriers and what transition and what changes did you see during those two time frames?
Mike, going back to school as an older student has a lot of barriers in itself. I was in my 30s, and I was going to school with people in their 20s. 21 going directly to their master's program. I was fairly new as a quadriplegic, so I was learning about how to take care of myself, what I needed to do, and the technology itself was pretty new to be able to read books. We had to actually scan the books, and then use the computers to read it to me that way, because I have extreme difficulty turning pages, as you said.
Yeah.
Using Dragon Naturally Speaking was fairly new. So learning how to do that, the expense of buying computers and these programs, buying Dragon Naturally Speaking, that was an expense that other people didn't have to purchase. Um, Getting into downtown Pittsburgh, I went to the University of Pittsburgh. Being in a city, parking a wheelchair accessible van 3 days a week was challenging. Uh, the actual getting in the building, the main doors were automated. Then I had to use a elevator to go up, but a lot of the other doors were not automated. So that was one of my concerns, and I brought that to the administration and said, "Hey, we're the Department of Rehabilitation, Counseling, and Assistive Tech. Why don't we have automated doors into some of these places that I need to get into?" So that was something that I could affect change in that building. So it was very different being an older student, being a person with a disability, going to school, trying to do master's level work. When I hadn't done schoolwork, I hadn't written in APA style in years. So it was challenging. It was fun. Loved the people, had great professors. It was all in person at that time. So they got to know me, I got to know them. It was a really good experience. My undergrad is from Penn State, and I always joked around and said I would never, ever in a million years go to Pitt. It's a big rivalry, but I'm glad I did. I learned a lot, and I met a lot of great people that I'm still in contact with today.
It's about building those relationships. And, you brought up a lot of good points right there, man. The difference in being an older student, being able to be there, and then now you're working with some of the younger students. It's a great opportunity for growth for both, if you go into it and do it the right way. Um, and that's what I loved about my master's program. When I got to school, I was going for my master's is in education. And when I got there, one of my professors, building on a relationship. She knew in my undergrad I'm a history major. And so she and I were teaming up. She was doing some book writing. Phenomenal lady. I mean, you go to Barnes and Noble now, and there's probably 20 books on the shelves that she's authored over time. And she did a lot of military history. That's right in my wheelhouse, man. I love that stuff. And so I ended up in a total different format because of our relationship, and she knew my work ethic. I ended up being a grad assistant and being able to help her on some of the research that she was doing, totally out of the realm of even my master's. But it was about that relational um, opportunity that she and I could get down scholastically, and she knew that I would want to really start delving into something that was really at the core of who I was. And so, it's a great thing when you find and I tell people all the time, you know, don't just chase a degree because it's going to give you a monetary value behind it. Chase something that you're truly passionate about. Find that degree because in some form or fashion, everybody's going to get tired of the work they're doing. But if that's something that's at the core of who you are, that's a passion of what you have, you're more apt to stick it out because of that passion. That drive is still there.
Mike, I think that's a great point. Do something that you're passionate about, that you're going to enjoy. Personal growth, making relationships, learning from other people, learning about different backgrounds, where people come from, their perspectives. All those things in education are important, and it's a two-way street. It
Yeah.
enables people to see us, people with disabilities, as people. They don't see the chair after a while. They see Greg or they see Mike. And
Mhm.
building those relationships can really change not only our lives, but other people's lives and their perspective and how they view people with disabilities. And then they go out and talk to people in the world, and they're professionals. And it's just an ongoing thing of betterment, just for the whole experience of going to school.
You said it, man. So you're changing the whole attribute, right? A lot of times these courses are set up by a certain stigma. They've got certain parameters that they have to fall under to be accommodating. To also, the school I chose was going to be a school that had accreditations behind it. So there was a lot of federal parameters that were set in place that not only did you have to do the educational section of it, you also had to do these other checklists to be accredited, right? So the school has parameters that they have to follow as well. But seeing somebody with a disability, a physical disability in some of these classes really changed the parameters of the other students. And I saw
Yes,
it, I saw it in real time where, say, like in education, you're taking a physical education class for teachers. And now they have to dwell into, uh-oh, I got a guy with a physical disability that's in my class. How do I accommodate him? And so
right.
it makes them be a better educator because now they have to think outside the box.
Exactly, Mike. I was in my mind thinking outside the box because we may do things differently, but we still want to participate. We still want to be there, and we have a lot to offer people if they just do things a little bit differently and include us.
Right. And inclusion right there, that's the key word. None of us want to be isolated. And that's in our DNA. I mean, that everybody wants to be liked. Nobody wants to go their own realm. And
Right.
so when we're talking inclusion, but you have to talk about the outer perimeters of that. What's exclusion? We want everybody to be able to come to the playground and play.
Right.
And as guys and girls with physical disabilities, we just want to be invited to the party. And so we need to talk about inclusion in real time. How does that happen? What does it look like? And we talked a little bit about the physical barriers of being able to get into a building. Push buttons on doors work great for people that are able-bodied as well. When you've
Yes, they
got a
do.
boatload of papers or you got whatever, you hit the button, automated doors that automatically open at a hospital work great. And we saw during COVID, it helps to keep down the transmittal of bacteria. Those are all good working products. We just have to work better to make them more readily available.
Well, buddy, I think we're getting a little long on time today, but we actually brought up a lot of good topics for future podcasts. And I'll give you the last word, and then we'll head out. But folks, thanks for listening to us. I appreciate it. I know Mike and I have a lot to say about different topics, and if you have any topics that you'd like us to cover, let us know about it. Mike, I'll give you the last word, brother.
Man, I always enjoy doing these things with you, man. Just because we're able to speak about real world. Look, these are our full life experiences. Other people are going to have different. That's not a knock on anybody. I welcome the opportunity to be able to cover other topics. We bring more and more people in just to be able to highlight their life. Greg, man, I truly appreciate you and your love of life and education. Yeah, we brought up a lot of good points. There's a lot we didn't get to touch. We'll probably have to do another podcast later to talk about different stigmas that people face and different attachments and labels. Labels are not always a bad thing. Sometimes they can be. But I challenge people that are out there, folks with a physical disability, get out there and challenge yourself. Keep striving to get more and more education. It's one of those things that you can't never know enough. I've got a hunger for education. If I don't know something, I want to know it. I want to be able to figure out how to fix things. And if I don't know it, now we've got YouTube and we've got all these different parameters. Learn it, know it, but don't just keep it for yourself. Pass that education and that information along to somebody else.